Digital safety comes down to people and training people. And I mean that from the people who are boots on the ground, the teachers, and how they use the system and making sure that they're trained and understand how things work.
You're listening to the smartsocial.com podcast. I'm your host, Josh Oakes. This is our District Talk segment where we interview district leaders to learn how they're keeping students safe on social media so those students can someday shine online. Now, let's get back to the interview.
I'm Dr. Darrell Floyd. I'm Superintendent of Schools in Enid, Oklahoma, and we have about 17 campuses and 8,000 students. We're about an hour and a half northwest of Oklahoma City.
Hi, I'm J Vari. I'm Assistant Superintendent of District Operations and our secondary schools in the Appoquinimink School District in Delaware. We're located in the northern part of Delaware. We're the third largest public school system with about 13,000 students. And the one tidbit is we're the fastest growing school system. I say in the region, maybe on planet Earth, we grow at about 300 to 500 students a year. It's a great problem to have.
I am Cheser, the superintendent of the Durango, Colorado School District in beautiful Southwest Colorado. We have about 4,600 brick and mortar students, an additional 1,100 online across 12 different schools, plus a shared school and our own online school.
In the age of one-to-one, how are you preparing students for positive technology use in the classroom?
Well, in Oklahoma, we have a character education program that we have adopted, especially in my district, and it's one of our 7 broad goal areas in our strategic plan, and it's called Great Expectations. Basically what the program entails is character education traits that we all want to instill in our own kids, and therefore we want to try to instill those in all of our 8,000 students as well. And within that Great Expectations program, it incorporates a number of life principles, things like citizenship, courtesy, honesty, integrity, and all of those things are tied into what we know as digital citizenship and how to use technology successfully. So it started out obviously as a character education program, but then morphed into how can we kind of broadly paint that with a broader brush and delve into how you can utilize the Great Expectations program effectively in the use of technology. And we all want our own kids to utilize technology appropriately, and therefore we try to do that with all of our students as well.
I'll go back to the LMS on the positive use of technology in the classroom. I mean, the future of every classroom is a learning management system. It doesn't matter what you use. I mean, I teach classes in graduate schools and in doctoral programs using Moodle, Canvas. We use Schoology. There's any number of them, but kids are going to need to interact in that type of environment in college and in their career fields, most likely, some type of online platform. Even a few years ago, not all teachers were using it. I think COVID sped it up, and I think most teachers are using, in a positive way, an LMS system. Kids are getting used to it, and that's just a college and career skill they're going to need to have.
Well, I think that, again, talking to students, we don't do as good a job as we should, as I kind of said before, as far as digital citizenship. We realize we need to be much more intentional about that. Students just aren't going to learn those skills through osmosis, right? And they aren't necessarily seeing those modeled well, throughout the community and online. So it's important that we are teaching those skills. So we have started to do that. We've created some standards. We're following ISTE standards on that. So that's a step. But our real focus is on how do we help our students be really strong digital content producers and use that as a form of communication. So that is one of our Portrait of Graduate Skills, Confident Communicator, and actually says very clearly being a successful writer, speaker, listener, and digital content producer. And so we have a very specific blueprint that say, how do you do that in a classroom? And so helping our teachers also understand the power of technology to communicate in ways that you can't do just through writing. Now, of course, in the age of ChatGPT, this is also a concern about, helping students make good choices about what they are producing and what they're putting out there. But that's one area where we're trying to make sure they focus on putting out content for good and learning how to discern. Being, critical thinkers is really important.
How have you been successful in increasing parent engagement to help keep students safe on social media?
We try to touch on that topic as we go through the school year and have parent-teacher conferences and parent nights. We'll also try to incorporate some instructional sessions that address online safety and some do's and don'ts, and here's what you need to be aware of with your own kid at home, and try to safeguard them so that they can safeguard themselves.
This is a school by school conversation, right? The district can put together communications, safety protocols, and that's important. But when a school holds an event for parents whose kids go to that school and they talk about positive social media, the use of cell phones, the types of apps that kids have access to, how to help parents use tools that can keep their kids safe, those things go a long way to engage parents and to help them to know what their kids have access to. And quite frankly, look, I'm a parent of teenagers. I don't always know what they're doing on there. I mean, they're engaging in ways that we never even imagined as kids. And so when the school understands those things and has people who can explain them to parents, that's a great event to hold, to engage families. And it's a win-win for everybody.
So it's interesting. This comes up a lot. I have a superintendent's parent advisory council, and anybody can be on it. We have been having the meetings through Zoom because that just seems to be the more convenient. That's a great thing that came out of COVID, right? That people are much more comfortable with that. And it's something that definitely comes up quite a bit. So I think having those kinds of meetings, hearing directly from parents in a really safe space, has given us that information about when is this happening and what grades is it happening where we're not using it for good. And so our PIO, Public Information Officer, then has taken that information. She sits in on those meetings, and then some of those meetings, and then she's been able to put some things out in our staff newsletters, in our Infinite Campus messaging, and that sort of thing. The other thing is we have a safety and security director, and she has brought in speakers several times, including speakers about, social media use, to engage with parents and with students together. Also, we've started some new anti-bullying programming and help students understand, and families and communities, because we send that information out to them as well, help them understand how sort of the nuts and bolts of how cyberbullying is happening, how you can control your students' use of social media, really giving some tips as to, how are kids sneaking around with this, helping parents understand that. I think there's definitely a lot of questions that parents have that we haven't been able to answer. And we are very transparent about that we're still trying to figure that out, that we aren't able to see everything that the students do during the school day. We know that things are happening at home, that it's not because of bad parenting, it's because of not knowing, and students are being very clever around all this.
Are there any stories that come to mind about any social media incidents you have been able to get in front of or avoid by being proactive?
Yes, I'll give you one example. Not too long ago, we had an upcoming varsity football game where we had some social media chatter and, this is going to happen, and if you do this, we're going to do that, and that type of thing. So we took it seriously, began to investigate it, contacted the other school's administration, and kind of beefed up our security at the games. And with the communication, enhanced communication with the other school and the enhanced security, nothing ended up happening. But sometimes I think it's situation, like a lot of disciplinary situations we handle on campuses, is that when you do get a threat of some kind like that through social media, you can't just sweep it under the rug and hope that it goes away and hope that it's nothing, especially in today's world with school shootings and all kinds of other bad things that are happening, you as an administrator have to take it seriously, have to investigate it, and then take the appropriate actions. And that's what we've tried to do.
I've seen, we're 21 schools, 13,000 kids. Even when we put out a communication, it's far more likely that a parent's going to read it from their principal than they're going to read it from the public information officer. It's just the way it is. The closer to the classroom teacher that you get, the more likely they're going to pay attention. I don't like getting out in front of social media incidents is incredibly difficult. What I should say is I don't know, meaning there's probably dozens of incidents that we've prevented, but we wouldn't know because they didn't occur, right? So I don't say not to prevent things. I think the best way to do that is when you know something and you're ready to share the information, be as transparent as possible. And we try to do that. But quite frankly, the way things happen with social media is like we could be in a police investigation with something and the police aren't ready to issue a statement. And so therefore, neither are we. And it's blowing up on social media with all kinds of false information, inaccuracies, and we're not even ready to say anything about it. So I do believe in full transparency when issues occur. We're not putting anything under the carpet, and neither should anybody else. But social media is faster. It's just faster than any school district will likely be able to use it to prevent. Now, again, as you try to be transparent, you might prevent some things from getting bigger or happening at all. But we don't always know what we've prevented when we've tried to prevent things.
So one idea or one thing that happened with us is, as is, probably typical across the country, there tends to be some divisiveness, and, school districts, unfortunately, have been targeted with sometimes inaccurate information. And so what we've tried to do is have a group of community members that we keep informed of, what are the facts. And so when people are posting on, especially Facebook, right? Maybe Twitter, but especially Facebook, items that are inaccurate. And sometimes you can tell the local newspaper will post something, and then all of a sudden there's this whole commentary that goes in a different direction. And you can just tell it's going to explode, and all of a sudden people are going to think what's listed or what's written is accurate. For example, there was a situation where a local politician, for whatever reason, said that we had students who were identifying as cats and we had litter boxes in our bathrooms. Not true at all. But because we have people monitoring, because our PIO is really great also at looking at that, we have people who will contact us. We were able to get ahead of that right away. And that's just one small example of when people start posting things that are inaccurate, or they start talking about students or schools in a way that's damaging, that we can kind of get out front and say, hey, actually, this is the accurate information. Here's the link to see a news release on that or more information. Also, please call. Here's a number if you have any questions. So that was a big one that was getting ready to explode, but we tend to have that a lot in public education.
What would your advice be to educators and administrators to work together to create a culture of digital safety and responsibility in their schools?
I think it has to come from a common sense perspective that is a message that is repeated over and over again to students, parents, faculty and staff, administration, parents, community members, and stressing the importance of digital citizenship and the fact that, as we just talked about, actions have consequences. And we were able to, back to the football social media post, we were able to finally track that back to the student that posted it. And we try to stress to our students that actions do have consequences, and you don't want to put yourself in a negative situation because of that. So part of that is continuing to stress the good digital citizenship and safety online, things like don't talk to strangers online, don't give out your personal information, don't share your login information on any system with somebody that you don't know. So all those common sense items are something that sometimes we get into a pattern of thinking that everybody just knows that now, but students don't always know that, and we have to continue to repeat that over and over so we make sure that they do know it.
Digital safety comes down to people and training people. And I mean that from the people who are boots on the ground, the teachers, and how they use the system and making sure that they're trained and understand how things work. But also, we've invested in a cybersecurity, a specific cybersecurity person. And their sole responsibility is to ensure that our systems are safe. They're safe for kids, they're safe for teachers. And if there's any type of threats, they're investigating that and making sure that we get out in front of it. So, I mean, it's people, and then it's specialized positions, but also making sure people are trained.
So my advice to any school district in making sure that we're using technology in a way that engages students as responsible is I feel like it's very important to have a vision for that. And it may not be that you have a very specific vision or strategy for technology, but that you see how technology fits into your overall vision. So it's not something separate or different. Including that in a strategic plan. Like, how are you going to ensure technology is used for good in all the different areas, whether it's productivity, like in our strategic plan, we have an area for the technology productivity, and then other areas for sort of maker tech and STEM, and then an area for, teacher professional learning. How are we using that in classrooms? And then an area for digital citizenship. So all four of those areas for us seem to be important. And having that embedded, not just in a separate tech plan. I think that's important for our tech staff to kind of have the nuts and bolts, but having it as a deeper part of your overall strategic plan is going to ensure that it happens and that you're monitoring for implementation impact. So I think that's important, having a vision, embedding that into your overall strategic plan, ensuring you have process owners for this, because none of this is going to happen if you just throw it to the wind and say, hey, it's just going to happen. So, sometimes that's your tech director is not necessarily the person who's going to make sure that the professional learning for teachers is happening. That might be in the curriculum instruction department. So making sure that that's really clear, who owns that, what are their deliverables, what are the time frames, to make sure that it happens. I think also giving teachers the ability to pioneer and trailblaze and that sort of thing. So we've started in my former district, and now we're starting it here. We have sort of a cohort of pioneer teachers who are going through professional learning, who are trying out some new things, being able to see how you can fit into your schedule, digital citizenship, how you can fit into your schedule, integration of technology. When is it a good time to use technology and when is it not? How do we embed technology in our existing curricular programs? So all of those kinds of things. So having those sort of trailblazer teachers, and then it can grow organically because it's not something that just someone in the district office says we have to do. It is really something that people get so excited about because they see other teachers doing that. We're having a PD Academy the first day of school in the fall, and we'll be showcasing, teachers who have, tried some new things and made it work. So I think that's great. I also think involving students in this decision making, trying it out. We have 3 students on our school board who are great at they represent the district. And so every time we're thinking about maybe doing something new or this new program, of course, we're getting our voice of the staff, our community. It's also great to get that sort of formalized voice from students and finding out, hey, did this work? It's really always interesting at a board meeting, though, to say here things like, yeah, I had to show my teacher how to use Google Classroom because she wasn't quite sure how to do it and she wasn't doing things right in the Google Drive. That's great for us to be transparent about that we don't know these things. And we may sometimes need to enlist our students to give us advice, support, and their feedback.
What are your 1 to 2 biggest social media concerns for the future?
Well, I think safety and security obviously is at the top of the list nowadays with all the bad things that have happened across the nation. We can't fall into a false sense of security and think that it won't happen here, because it's been proven again and again that it can happen anywhere. I would say that safety and security is always our first priority. And some of that falls into social media and technology and digital citizenship. I would say two other issues that have kind of arisen to the top of the list nowadays are, since we are coming out of the pandemic now, are things like social emotional health, social emotional learning, and how we can put kids in the best situation possible to succeed post-pandemic, I guess I should say. And we know that there has been learning loss through the pandemic, and we want to do what we can to provide students the opportunity to succeed regardless of where they were in that whole pandemic issue. And some of that is social emotional learning, and we need to provide students surround them with all of assistance that we can, not only academically, but also socially and emotionally, so that they can learn effectively.
I've kind of alluded to this in the past, but unnecessary fear. I mean, it's almost terrorism at this point, right? People can put fear out into the atmosphere with almost no repercussions and create hysteria where it doesn't need to be. And it's a shame. People who don't have accurate information are posting that, and I think that's not going away. And it makes me upset because it paints a worse picture of individual scenarios, schools, and districts that don't need to be painted. The honest truth is that schools are still a very safe place for kids, and that's not what you hear about when you read the news. And that worries me.
I think the first one always is going to be if it's used for evil, right? I mean, if people are using social media, and I'm just going to say students, parents, anyone, using it to be destructive rather than constructive. Social media can be an amazing tool for getting positive stories out, letting people know information, really highlighting the great things that students are doing, helping them have community connections, and in the future, job connections and that sort of thing. And that's what we really want it to be. But a concern is that unfortunately, you see way too many times it's used to sort of slam somebody or to spread inaccurate information, to really cause deep social emotional harm to students. So I think that's my number one concern. I think also number two would probably be in a sort of a different light, that we may not be using it to its full potential. I think sometimes we rely on old school ways of getting information out, and we really haven't realized the potential. I'll just say, in my former district, we used Twitter like crazy. We had, I think, 260 different staff members and groups in our school district that were very posted frequently, interacted frequently. Families really felt like they could get information that way, and that's not been the case here. I think part of that is just it's not been the tradition, and then maybe our community is using it in a different way than maybe we would like for them to. So we've got to also educate our community that, hey, if you want information about what's going on, don't feel like you're out in the dark. You can go straight to Twitter. You can go to Facebook. You can go to Instagram. We've done a few TikTok videos, but you can do a few things, and whatever works for you, you're going to get the information.
Funding is tough. What advice would you give to other school districts to secure funding to create resources that parents need?
Well, in most states, like the two that I've been in Oklahoma for 9 years, and before that I spent 28 years in public education in Texas, and this is my 26th year as superintendent, and funding has always been an issue. and I'm sure it is nationwide in most states. Most states have kind of a conglomeration of how public schools are funded through federal, state, and local funds. And I would encourage people to continue to communicate effectively with their legislators and stress to them that education is important and teachers are important. And we've got to do what we have to do to appropriately fund public education, because public education is educating for the greater good. We take all comers, we educate all comers, and to do that, you need to pay teachers appropriately. You need to have the resources necessary to educate kids appropriately, and all that takes money. And so I think communication with legislators is appropriate. And I think it's another issue is that we need to promote education as a whole. It's too easy these days, and I see it happen again and again and again, for legislators, for instance, to just badmouth public education like we're the enemy, and teaching is doing something nefarious, which teachers are not most of the time doing anything nefarious. They are trying to teach to the best of their abilities and educate kids. Are there ancillary, isolated incidences of bad things happening? Probably. Well, then go and address those isolated incidents, and don't paint with a broad brush as if everyone is bad. Because if we don't stop doing that, we're not going to have enough teachers to teach our kids moving on into the future.
The one piece of advice I would say about funding, I'm going to do two pieces of advice on funding. The first is mix the pots. We have all these weird, distinct pots in education. Some pots are dedicated to special education. We got ESSER money to support through COVID. You might have some IDEA money from the federal government for things, and so for that would be for special education, Title I, so on and so forth. So school leaders who are listening will understand what I'm talking about in terms of pots. But those pots don't necessarily need to be dedicated to individual things. So, lots of people did use ESSER money to support technology, and I thought that was a really good idea. The second thing, though, is that we need refresh cycles on technology, and I don't think we always think for that in terms of planning. We'll use a pot of money like ESSER. Let's say we buy one-to-one support for that, or we implement something and we buy a bunch of smart boards. Well, those smart boards are going to break, and then eventually they're going to die. And so if you don't plan for a cycle of refresh, you're going to end up with a bunch of old tech in your schools, and that's no good to anybody.
Really look at your processes and try to be more efficient, with your processes in your school district, and possibly you could find funding in that through process improvement. Also, there are federal funds that I would think most school districts still have some leeway in ESSER funds. Perhaps, this would be a great way to use that. Also, we've found that even in communities that you didn't think were very generous, that there are definitely people, businesses, industry, community organizations, nonprofits, and philanthropic organizations that find this area of things in technology to be very attractive to fund. They're also concerned about the impact of social media and maybe its impact on the future and student success. And so those are a variety of funding sources I would check out.
Thanks for listening to our smartsocial.com podcast. I'm your host, Josh Oakes. This was our District Talk segment where we interview school district leaders to learn how they're keeping students safe on social media so those students can someday launch into their future by shining online. This episode was brought to you by our smartsocial.com VIP program. It's called the Very Informed Parent Program, which helps you engage your students with teen-led video lessons. Stay one step ahead with our premium parent newsletter and discover hidden features on trending apps on teens' phones and our 54 plus live parent and student-friendly events every single year. You can click on the link below to chat with one of our team members if you want a free pass to our VIP program to support your community with our smartsocial.com resources. And if you're a district leader who has a success story, we would love to feature you on a future episode. You can click the links below to reach out. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Have a great day.